producer said they were the official band of the alt-right, which was really puzzling.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Digital Marketing, show number 111. We're coming to you Friday, September 22nd, with my amicable and very chatty co-host of Mr. Edward StOnge from Flip2, Mr. Stuart Butler from Fuel Travel, and Mr. Robert Cole from Rock Cheetah. And we were talking about a very highly sensitive hospitality marketing concept of the Depeche Mode.
Actually, Kevin May, former editor-in-chief of T News, has written an extensive book on it called Halo on their Violator album. So if anybody has any Depeche Mode questions, please forward them directly to Mr. May himself.
Why is this not surprising, Mr. Robert, that you are once again a fount of absolutely detailed information that most people in this world would never, ever know?
But most importantly, like most of his information, it's absolutely worthless.
Well, now, Don, to keep
I'll remember to tell that investor I was speaking to who really wanted to do that big round on Flip2 that, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you're right. My advice is full of crap. Don't listen to me. No, a little peek behind the curtain on this. We, of course, have a list that we share between all of us. And Robert's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert, for not only creating almost all the content out for the past couple of weeks, given the circumstances, but also sharing it out with the HSMI Digital Marketing Council in the attempts of getting them to participate in an active way with our lively live show.
Well, that was Holly's idea. So.
Well, but you've been the facilitator, which is
doing
awesome.
Her bidding.
But by the same token of it, we get the chance to go over and dialogue in kind of a green room before the show as to certain so forth and so on. And Stuart has actually one-upped everybody in a topic that he's going to bring to the conversation today. Maybe not this first one, but maybe somewhere along the line. And Tim Peter, who's not with us, which we can now make fun of, attempted to be snarky in his reply. Henceforth, Mr. Stewart did a really amazing slapdown of, I don't know, the email was what? Just the scroll itself was paid.
There are about 950
yeah. Where Stewart corrected Tim on his attempt. There he is. He's coming to defend. He's coming to defend. But it made it very clear that we are not the originators of our English language. We are simply a shared component of it. And the originators of it really, in fact, have the right to determine what is the spelling and correct pronunciations.
Well, Chip Cheerio.
Into the breach once more, Mr. Tim.
See, what's really disturbing is, and not a lot of people know this, but when Stuart's not on podcast and not on this show, he actually has a really deep New Jersey accent. It's quite disturbing.
Actually, he has a deep old Jersey accent.
Yeah.
And that's even more disturbing because he was brought up in the Bronx. So.
Actually, there's a funny thing. This is a silly thing. I don't know why I know this, but do you know that the English accent, what we in America think of as the English accent, is actually what changed, right? So people in colonial America and people in England around colonial times spoke like Americans do in terms of the accent. The accent shifted over time away from...
It was a class-based thing. The upper
class didn't
thing. Want to sound like the commoners. Yeah, there's a really good podcast called Stuff You Should Know, and they did a whole episode recently on accents, and they went into it in great detail. But yeah, how I speak is messed up because I live in South Carolina, and it has that southern twang. But if you go to England, in the South especially, my original accent is considered, even though I grew up working class, it's considered more of an upper class accent, which only developed in the last 100 years.
You sort of have the BBC accent, right? I mean, is your natural accent? Is that true?
Well, if I go home, everyone calls me a damn Yankee, and I get beaten up until I speak proper English. So.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
Living in South Carolina has given a little bit of that twang.
Mm-hmm.
I know you know this. You've said this yourself before. You sometimes come off sounding Australian.
I get that.
It's that weird combination, or South African. It's that weird combination of English meets the South.
One person once asked if I was French, which we almost came to blows over that.
Wow. That's an insult to be paid for. Yeah.
The first time I met you, I thought you were Australian, but I couldn't quite place it. I have this terrible habit. I think I know you all know, but I think most of the people who've seen the show before know. I actually majored in voice in college. I was a a music major and was a vocalist, was a singer. And we had to take diction classes because you had to speak in French. You had to sing in French, Italian, German, and of course English. And so you learned the proper phonetic pronunciation for those languages. But the problem that comes from that is you develop an ear for accents and an ear for how these things work. And I have this horrible tendency to mirror people's accents that I have to focus really hard when talking to people from, other places, that I don't start, well, hello, how are you? Or I know that's Cockney. I realize that's not your accent, Stuart, but it's always a challenge.
I will give advice. Anyone that travels to other places where people speak differently than you, don't guess. Or when people I guess, don't guess. Just ask them, where's your accent from?
Right. I always guess. I purposely always guess wrong.
That sounds like something you would do.
Well, since we've danced around the whole conversation, what inspired this conversation? Mr. Stewart, would you like to bring in context what exactly the topic was that inspired this dialogue for us this morning?
Glad to. So essentially, Uber is pretty big in Europe, the same as here. Probably not as prevalent. And in London specifically, there's been a lot of back and forward because there's a union of cab drivers over there that have been really resistant, and they have a lot of the government is on the cab drivers' side. So as of today, they've announced that they're not going to renew the contract for Uber in London. So at the end of September is when the contract expires. Now, there's going to be an appeal process, which they can continue to operate until the appeal is over. But basically what they're saying is Uber's not living up to the standards that they expect. They're doing some shady stuff like grayballing, which we can go into. And they don't want Uber in the country anymore, or in the city of London anymore. So it's big. It represents about 40,000 jobs, according to some of the data I've seen. There's 40,000 drivers, obviously not full-time drivers, part-time drivers. So it's a big deal. And it's one that a lot of other countries are watching. I mean, you look in Europe in general, places like Denmark have already banned Uber completely. So this could be a slippery slope for Uber in Europe.
Now, it's not going to affect jobs because all those Uber drivers are just going to become Lyft drivers if they work
Lyft doesn't
already.
exist over there.
Yeah.
So, and it's a different ecosystem because in London specifically, there's a couple of cab apps that do similar things to Uber. Right. So there's Cabby, there's Halo, which you can use similar way, frictionless transactions to book cabs ahead of time. So, and public transportation over there, honestly, is infinitely better. America needs to wake up.
When it's on time.
Well, the buses,
generally speaking,
the London black cabbies are the best.
Yeah, they are
really in the world, right?
Yeah, and they're very well trained, right? I mean, it's a process.
Knowledge.
They know how to get places without GPS.
Is there unionization of them over there? Is it hard to get into the cabbie business?
Yes.
Very regulated, lots of training, apprenticeships.
There's a big test they have to pass known as the knowledge, if I remember correctly, right?
Right, yeah.
Where they basically have to be able, from memory to go just about anywhere in town. In one of the biggest cities in the world.
And most complexly
and
laid
one of the most complex that only date back, I don't know what, 2,000
I think Boston can compete with them a little bit. I think Boston has the ability to compete with them a little bit. It's got the windy road thing where nothing's a straight line and everything's got to go around.
Those windy roads weren't. But those windy roads weren't started by the Romans. Some of those windy roads in London go back a couple of millennia.
That's funny. So one of the main reasons that they're doing it is what I mentioned earlier, grayballing. So what they've found out is, and this has been in the news a little bit. I don't know if it's really been as big as people.
Because I don't think they know how to explain it.
Yeah, so essentially what they've done is they don't want any kind of scrutiny, or Uber doesn't. They don't want government officials spying on them or watching them to see if they're adhering to standards. So they've created this algorithm, or they had created an algorithm within their software that identifies if you're a government agent and will refuse you service. So they're geofencing around government buildings. They're looking at your behavior. They're analyzing your credit card to see if it's related to a government account. So they're doing a lot of things. And they're just basically not taking government officials that are going to be looking at their operation. And so that's the screams.
And in fairness to Dara, right? Dara Kozrowski, who's just taken over from Expedia
to
Uber. This is all stuff that
Previous.
happened under the prior leadership.
Travis. This is
You know,
under the Travisdom.
under the
Yes.
Travis system, right? Which, a lot of the things, the gray ball system, what were some of the other ones? Obviously, the horrid stuff with the alleged sexual assaults and alleged, awful behavior and things along those lines. A lot of the things that Uber is alleged to have done or is known to have done under the prior leadership, bluntly, my opinion, right? So this is just my opinion, not fact, is evil.
Yeah.
I've been saying that this whole time.
You absolutely have, Ed. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But something like grayballing is a terrible, terrible thing. Something like the alleged activity where they were flooding Lyft with, spammy calls to tie up their drivers that then were actually bogus is just evil.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ed, you absolutely have been leading the charge for a while why you're bearish on the company Uber. And I'm not at all surprised by London's activities here, and I'll be less surprised when more cities jump on board.
Well, and it's even more problematic for Uber because I believe certainly the London cabbie union and that sort of thing is basically looking at Uber's problem is they don't have any liability, right? That is their business model. These are independent contractors driving their own vehicles, and Uber is just software and logistics. So if anybody gets into a wreck or does something wrong, Uber, it's not them. And so you're in kind of this gray area. And I always, from the U.S. perspective, you're either a W-2 or a 1099 sort of relationship with an organization. And Uber drivers probably fall somewhere in the middle, right? I mean, it is somewhere in there because they can only find who they're going to work with through Uber. They only charge what's going to be charged through Uber. So they aren't really independent contractors who go, oh, I'll do that for $10. No, Uber wants 22, right? So that's a real major problem of making these guys either liability for accidents or liability for employees, or calling them employees and taxes and now you got to start paying payroll taxes. That kills Uber's business model. So will be very interesting. Although on the other side, you have the classic, I call it kind of the Amazonian approach, where it is collusion between the consumer and this platform against whatever brands, government saying, we like this, it's convenient, don't mess this up, right? So you pull all those Uber drivers out of London, you've got transportation problems. Everybody's back down in the tube, which is jammed already, and not enough drivers. The traffic's horrific. Maybe it improves the traffic. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean that's the question. In that specific city, that may not be a bad thing.
Yeah. But again, to get a cab and things like that, the number of people, I'm sure I haven't seen the stats, but ridership must have,
Well, listen, bottom line is this. Dara will patch this up. There will not be a lapse.
Right. They can't afford to not be in London.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and they can't afford to not be in London while trying to IPO.
Right. And
that's all analysts will focus on is who's the next London? Is it New York?
But Dara's got to figure out a very clever way to do that without setting this precedent of some form of liability or licensing the driver, being responsible for licensing their own drivers or, inspecting the cars and all that sort of stuff. So
offer Travis up. Let Travis get some type of punishment from London, and you're good.
I don't think cabbies with a cabbie. That's not good enough for the black cab drivers.
Yeah, because the black
they want it. It's a kill it with fire sort of.
They're gonna have to start doing more background checks, more safety check. There's a lot of things that they're gonna have to do regulatory wise to appease London at this point.
And they did do it in Los Angeles. They did do it in Los Angeles, where but it was Los Angeles that wound up doing the background checks and things like that, right? You had to go submit, So I don't know. They may do it where the government, does it where you have to be licensed, but it's not Uber licensing. It's the government, doing whatever.
Well, and Airbnb has mostly figured this out, right? I mean, government affairs is just marketing under a different name, right? Right. It's a sales and marketing activity to a different customer segment.
Sure.
Yep.
And this is a solvable problem. This is something that Dara definitely has experience with. It's not like Expedia's never had any run-ins with regulatory bodies or things along.
I don't think they have. I mean, I think they've had pretty smooth sailing, right? It's never been anything about tax or anything like that.
Nothing.
No.
And London is too valuable a market, both in actual dollar terms and certainly, as Ed rightly points out, as they're thinking about IPO, as an IPO, for them not to be there. This is, I wouldn't call it a tempest in a teapot. This is a genuine problem for Uber, but it's a problem that I think Dara will solve, because he has no choice but to.
It's really a good thing they didn't end up with the GE guy. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Immelman?
Well, I'm gonna get on a soapbox for half a second, but I'll make this really quick. I did a podcast episode this past week about Facebook and the problems they've been running into with the Russian ads thing and their bogus data, and I'm doing air quotes around bogus data for a whole bunch of reasons and the like. And one of the things that has become really interesting to me of late is how governments are beginning to strike back against big digital players, right? I think the biggest threat to a Facebook, to a Google, to an Uber, to an Amazon and the like is less about their direct competitors as we know them, or the proverbial couple of kids in a garage thinking up the new world order, than it is regulatory regimes. These folks are now getting big enough. They are now impacting enough parts of people's lives all over the place, and enough political will is getting built up because consumers are starting to go, whoa, hold on a second, in some of these areas that it is the politicians are starting to go, hold up. Maybe all this openness and freedom and things like that we've had around all this stuff isn't such a good idea. And I think we're going to see, I think we are beginning to see, I don't think this, I think it's readily apparent that we're beginning to see, the regulators strike back. Yeah.
Correction.
A correction, right. The pendulum is swinging back in a lot of ways. Whether that's good, bad, or otherwise is another matter entirely, but I do think that that's going to be a reality for the next period.
I mean, fortunately for these big digital plays, they answer to the same people that put these government officials in office in a lot of these governments, with the exception of, not truly free governments. So, I mean, bottom line is it's not going to jerk too hard, because let's face it, could you imagine trying to take Amazon away from Americans right now?
No, God, no. Well, certainly not.
Or
Certainly not before Black Friday.
Right.
Certainly not before December 23rd.
Right. Or Facebook. Could you imagine?
Right. But I mean, you look at all the problems Google is having in the EU, and they're facing some very real challenges.
Well, the EU's leading everything, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you look at GDPR and things along those lines. That's going to create. I'm more worried about GDPR, frankly, for the folks who aren't Google and Amazon and Facebook, because they have the resources to actually manage those levels, in a different way. But I do think we're going to see a lot more regulation, or at least a lot more attempts at regulation over the next coming years. Again, because there's a lot of citizens, there's a lot of people starting to go, some of this crap's scary, in a way that wasn't happening 5 years ago, right?
And the reach, because we're a global community now, the reach, like if you look at GDPR, it affects anyone that's collecting data from anyone in the European Union, regardless of where they are. Right. So it affects American companies, but it's coming from a foreign government. It's far-reaching, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, I know that Robert gave us a great series of topics. I had one that I was just I wanted to throw out there with regard to Apple, since I'm loving Apple today, since my iPhone 6, who I tried to keep nurtured alive for these 3 years that I've had it to wait for this moment, literally dies today. And
So 8 or 10?
Oh, I want 10. I want 10. But my problem is I might be forced into an 8 just because, well, not having a phone sucks. And especially when you use Google Authenticator, because then everything you have to log into needs your authenticator. And that's all on my phone. And I'm like, yeah, no, my phone's dead. I'm screwed. Anyway, the topic about this is Apple about to accidentally kill government as a platform? The LinkedIn and the TechCrunch links that we had about it. I didn't get a chance to get too much into this. I just kind of read part of it. But Tim, you had thrown one article out. I think, Robert, you threw the other one out. Or no, Ed, you threw the first one out, I think.
Which one?
The LinkedIn one, the Pulse, Apple accidentally killed government platform. I think you had thrown that one out.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Ed did do this.
I didn't. Yeah, that was like just an in between.
It was just one of those grab ups. I looked at it like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, let's throw it in there too. So yes. So I grabbed it and threw it in here. So maybe we can think about it. So a little bit of detail about it. I didn't get to read it enough to be able to really speak to it.
So, and actually, we can bundle this into some other things that Apple's just kind of doing to screw people up. No, so I had found this article that was actually specific to Apple accidentally killing government as a platform. And what it was pointing out is some new things that they announced about how the App Store was going to look at apps really screwed up government sector. And so the idea is the government sector, I'm guessing, is really notorious for just using a generically available app from a vendor or wherever they come from for government, and kind of just calling it their own without changing it. So I shot it out, and I was actually looking for Stuart's feedback in on this because Stuart has apps
in that space.
Yeah, and because I was wondering, most hotels apps are templates. Yeah. So I was wondering, is this going to have an effect on hospitality? And Stuart had some really good insight on it.
Yeah. So essentially, Apple has either taken down or is not accepting new apps that look the same as an app that already exists. So it was to eliminate clones and spammy apps. And they've taken down over 200,000 apps off of the App Store under this new ruling that they have in their policy. Honestly, I've talked to a lot of app developers that do the same as us. With our Guest Express platform, we have a CMS that we deploy an app on. Now, if you're a hotel and you get the app, it's your app. So if you're the Breakers, it's the Breakers app, for example. If you're ABC Hotel, it's the ABC Hotels app, but it's published by us.
And Fuel only works with one of those hotels.
This is true.
Exactly.
But we have not seen any Apple going after those intentionally. So
Right.
I don't know if
they don't generally look as the same though, right?
They can. Colors are different sometimes if the hotel's not spending the time with the look and feel and wanting it to be
The core
customized.
functionality is the same, right?
Right.
I mean,
The core
that's a fair
functionality, you
statement.
can check in, you can check out. There's things that
And
every
placement
app
of
has.
buttons and navigation and things like that are
It's the same code. It's the same code for every customer, right?
Right.
The content is driven by the CMS, so that's what changes it. We have not come under scrutiny. I don't know other people that are in the space that have come under scrutiny, except for this one article about a municipality that was trying to put out a city app that was rejected. So I don't know. I'm not really concerned about it because I think the intent is to improve the quality of the App Store. So if the apps themselves do a good job of what they're intended to do, I don't think we're going to run into a problem. The only change we're considering at this point is who publishes the app. Because right now, Fuel is the publisher of the apps we put out in the store. We may have to change it to where every client that has Guest Express gets an account with Apple and is their own publisher. But that's a minor change, just a little bit of red tape.
Well, and that's going to be complicated for hotels as they change hands, or the name
Yeah.
is the same. And is that the old company, or that could get really ugly.
It can, because you have to be the official business. Like we went through
Right.
a lot of steps to make sure we could be a publisher. So it will a minimum extend the setup period because there's going to be that piece to add on to the installation.
Yeah, I don't think Apple intends to do that. I think they're really trying to get kind of these clones off there. They're confusing people, and people are thinking they're getting App A and they're getting something else that's not. Yeah.
The example I've heard again and again and again is, of course, Flappy Birds was a big success, and then you went on the App Store, and of course there were 800 versions of,
There were floppy eagles.
Floppy bird. Yeah, exactly.
And flippy floppy.
And
flippy cats.
And flip you the bird. And things like
BYRD.
that. And so, it does seem like this is more about providing Apple cover to throw off people who are just, putting up spammy crap. And I want to be really fair. Jennifer Palka, who wrote this, is a brilliant person. She's former Deputy Chief Information Officer of the United States under the Obama administration. She's married to Tim O'Reilly, if you know O'Reilly Books. So, I mean, this is somebody who lives in this world.
Well, if you haven't been able to tell, I only get my information from really good people.
Well, no, the reason I say this is I'm definitely not.
Wait, then why are you hanging with us? What? Wait.
No, but I
need to know how the common man will
That's
take.
it. The balancing act. It's got to be yin and yang. We're the yang.
That's why
the first thing I wanted to do was ask Stuart, like, is this hurting you? And I mean, again, this does appear like Apple's intent and what the verbiage says aren't quite aligned, And I think even the thing, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this one, that even the things where they've done where this, Cities app got bounced, I think that's more a case of over aggressiveness, and as they understand the implications, they're going to go, "Oh, we didn't mean those guys," right?
So now talking to something they very much intended to do that also screws up marketing of hotels is the new Safari functionality that allows you to block cross-domain cookies,
and especially remarketing.
Yeah.
Oh, listen, if I was in the retargeting world right now, I'd be I don't know what I'd be.
Troubled?
No, you're past worried at this point because
Panicky.
Because Apple, unlike Android, the majority of their users always upgrade to the latest software.
Yeah.
So,
if you're a good hotel marketer, this doesn't matter to you. And here's why, right? Google Analytics, any kind of analytics tracking that you use on a site is a first-party cookie, not a third-party cookie.
Right.
So it's not going to change anything you're doing from an attribution perspective with your marketing. The only thing it's really going to affect is third parties that do remarketing that are looking at multiple sites and trying to target people based on that. That stuff doesn't work for the hotel industry anyway. You should not be spending your money on that stuff anyway.
Go, Stuart, go!
So go invest in your email platform and your mobile website and your all that stuff. Stop wasting money on display advertising that doesn't work and will continue not to work after this, and you'll be just fine.
Right, because consumer behavior already kind of proves out that it doesn't work.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It works great for retail. It works great for things where you're repeat buying on a consistent basis. For someone like Amazon, perfect, right? Because you're going to probably go back and buy that stuff at some point. For hotel industry, the ROI is not there. The attribution modeling is misleading at best. Just don't waste your money on it and you'll be fine.
And Google has already updated the cookie that they use for their retargeting, so this shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, it won't affect AdWords. That's the one thing you do need to do is make sure, and you should have already done this, but connect your Google AdWords account to your Google Analytics account.
Absolutely.
If you do that, you don't have to worry about this.
That's right.
That's
That's
okay.
right.
If you haven't,
do that
that's
for a host of
you
reasons, but this should be the thing that actually lights a fire under you. Actually pushes you in that direction if you haven't done that already.
Incentivize you.
Well,
provides
motivates you.
Yeah,
Hey, I don't want to lose.
incentivize with an S.
I don't want to lose
Thank you.
one
I appreciate that.
one interesting point that came out of our first conversation with the changeover of knowing who and what you're connected to and what are assets and not assets. Because a lot of times I find from dealing with clients is that they don't treat their web domain as an asset. They don't treat their applications as assets. And so they lose track of who actually has it. I can't even begin to tell you how many times going through the process of auditing with people that they don't even have the authorship of their domain if they have a single site. It's left to some third past agency that seems to have held on to it, and they need to get it back to them, kind of thing. And the same too goes for what we're talking about of having accesses to legitimizing who's the authentic representative of the business entity has to get quantified and treated as an asset. And that has to be communicated between previous ownership to new ownership, or management transitions or whatever. It has to be as tangible as FF&E or whatever it is in a hotel, because it is something that, should you lose it or lose ability to access it, it's as damaging as if you had to have the sign taken down because it's not sitting on property you control anymore. So those are just mindful things that people to understand, that they have to begin to looking at the technology as an asset value. So,
and golf clap for Lauren, absolutely. I have to tell a funny story since nobody's broken out the bingo card and we're already 30 minutes into the show.
It's a record.
So in my
we triggered something because Holly just put up a request to speak.
Okay, so real quick, I'll just tell this story very fast. In my Wyndham days, we used to link to the hotel's websites from the property page. I believe they still do, but we certainly did at the time. And we did allow properties to have their own websites. I believe they still do. But certainly in that era, we absolutely did, because we couldn't manage it for 7,000 properties at that point. And invariably, about once a month or so, again, 7,000 properties, some franchisee either would go out of business or would close down or would simply fail to renew their domain. And then I would get a call because somebody'd say, hey, how come we're linking to porn?
Because if you weren't aware, that's the only other thing that happens on the internet.
What would happen is the domain would expire, and immediately a squatter would grab it, and the next thing you know, we'd be linking to porn. And it happened pretty.
It happens a lot.
You could almost set your clock to it, set your watch to it. About once a month, we'd find there's a hotel that's now a porn site.
And Tim discovered he could streamline this identification process just by looking through kind of the traffic stats. There are bikes.
A lot of traffic going to this hotel now.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, another funny story, just another quick digression. When I was at Bleeding Hotels, somebody stole our HTML and used it as the theme for a porn site. However, they didn't remove our analytics tags. So we were running a report for top pages and things like that. We were going, wow, what the hell, man? And it was just a different domain with different pages, but our template and our analytics tag.
It was the leading what's of the world.
So that was a fun day. Anyway, so Holly had a question or comment.
Well, she
was playing with the icons.
She wasn't really trying to joke. She's just teasing us with her participation today.
I thought we triggered something like one of us.
Actually, I think we have a segue though, because Stuart raised the point of hotels being intermittent purchases, right, as opposed to these regular, which is I really think, looking at hoteliers and loyalty in these brands, that's going to be a major focus coming up. I mean, how do they make their brands more relevant every day? And I believe one of these things is if we look to our friends at Airbnb of what they're doing. So you can now book restaurants on Airbnb. Gosh,
they are so smart.
Yep, and there have been some hotel groups who've gone out and done some smart, of trying to do things of, hey, how do we get our frequent guests to start doing things at the property level and visiting chefs and engage the loyalty members in that local destination, to do things never really, haven't gotten a lot of traction. Sort of thing on those. But this one with, you can now book a restaurant reservation on Airbnb with Resy, and the discussions burning around now of, actually, I'll post another link. There was an article this morning from Skift that Deanna wrote, that basically what they should do with this, of going out into all sorts of these other sorts of capabilities. Yeah, that's a thing.
Going back a little bit in time, it used to be that the bridge to create was taking a hotel guest that stayed at brand only, because of the brand's influence of identity and homogeny and so forth, and getting them to stay at an independent hotel. That was a big jump to get somebody to venture into the independent hotel stay world. And so too, the same next jump from people to stay from those hotels into Airbnb. But it's so funny when you talk to people that are within the industry and so forth, and they talk about their vacations, and I see them interviewed on TV and so forth. People are like, well, we're going to get out of here. We're going to go up to North Carolina for a week or so. Oh, we're going to go. Oh, we got some Airbnb. These are people that work in hotels and they're staying at Airbnb places because it works better for their family to have that kind of environment. So same too with restaurants. It used to be you only went to brand restaurants when you travel because you knew what to expect. Then because of the internet and because of Yelp and all these
I grew up differently. I actually saw chain restaurants as like the place I wanted to avoid. I've always been that way. But I come from an area where the mom and pops were the primary restaurateurs. They had much better food than the chains.
And usually that was the case. It was just a matter of uncertainty when it came to being in a city, not knowing the reputation, whether that's a good or bad restaurant. You see it across the street from your hotel, but is it worth making the venture? But then you get more information, you realize that there was great places to discover. And now look, go ahead.
But that's always how, like, well, you look at the classic ugly American traveling to Europe, right? Europe on $5, that sort of thing. In big packs on
that, by the way. Oh, I thought you were talking about me. Sorry.
No. I would have said.
I just want to point out that you can tell just by looking at the screen the European, because it's the only person wearing more than one shirt.
You know what? I didn't do that, so I moved over here.
But I am wearing 3 pairs of pants, so I sort of.
Whoa! Wait, we're supposed to be wearing pants at the show? Oh, that's right. No, but the idea for Airbnb to realize that there are people now that want to explore different ways of eating. And yes, to connect them to local restaurants and so forth is very cool. But there's that whole other culture of the small family dining that you can join a family for dinner and so forth. You know, that's an eventual progression in conversation.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, Lauren, I agree with what you're saying. I also think we have to look at some other contexts, right? Because one of the things that the internet has enabled that's really important are trust systems. Right. The reason that McDonald's became so big for so long was if you were driving on the brand new interstates in the 1950s and you were in an unfamiliar town and it was unfamiliar restaurants, what McDonald's promised, this is not a joke, was if you were driving your car, was you were promised a consistent quality of a hamburger and a clean restroom. Like that was what McDonald's was about. And if you look at the births of Motel 6 and Super 8 and Days Inn.
Holiday Inn's great sign.
Holiday Inn.
You could see it from a mile away.
That's what those were all about. Right. And really,
and Airbnb is a trust system. I mean,
Airbnb is a trust system. Uber is a trust system. Give credit where due. Really, the first real internet trust system was eBay. Right. I mean, if you really want to think about it. But this whole idea of creating trust and saying this is okay has created immense opportunities for independent businesses of all kinds, whether it's Etsy, whether it's somebody who's going to be on Airbnb, whether it's somebody who's going to be on Uber, whether it's somebody who's going to be on TripAdvisor, etc.
But here's an even more important thing for Airbnb is what is a traveler when they're not traveling? They're just a consumer.
Right.
So if Airbnb wants to truly monetize the trust system they've created, they need to find a way to get more transactions with everyone that trusts them.
Right.
This is a brilliant move to do that. Now, for the people listening in the audience who are hotels thinking, how am I going to do this? The answer is not offer rental cars.
That's funny. Yeah, I agree with you, Ed. I think a lot of people in the media are making out this is a big deal about packaging, and they're parlaying it in with the.
It has nothing to do with travel.
I agree, 100%. Because people are comparing it to, well, they're doing these excursions. You can stay in a room and go get a surf lesson and book a restaurant. That's not the point. They're getting into the restaurant business. They're making a play. And they're going to get as many restaurants as they can, and then they're going to compete with OpenTable. That's the direction they're going.
That's exactly right. Yeah, Priceline is probably the biggest loser here of anybody, honestly.
I agree.
In the longer term, right? If Uber executes, Airbnb executes well, and the like,
But look at Airbnb's valuation, right? $30 billion or somewhere in that neighborhood. They picked up Resy for $13 million investment. Series A round. That's pretty small. For something that freaking big. So and when you look at Airbnb, their whole thing is like, travel and experience the city like a local. Well, what's better than helping the locals experience their city like a local better? Sort of thing, like improve that.
Just wait. Retail's next.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
going to be the
And-
anti-Amazon approach to retail.
And the
Right.
and it's going to Yelp is the other person who's in some real trouble here, right?
Yeah.
Yelp
Poor
is
Yelp.
just
Again.
Poor Yelp.
always.
They're
Now
the whipping stick of the internet. Like
Now, I will tell you the one thing, if we can broaden the discussion for 1 second, the one thing that I would look at really closely, and I just posted a link. Peter O'Connor wrote a post on T News about a week or so ago, and other folks who I think are in real problems when we talk about these trust systems, and we've had this conversation before, but the chains are in trouble.
Absolutely.
And I think the biggest problem that the chains have at the moment is they're no longer controlling the terms of the discussion, right?
Right.
Expedia and people like Peter O'Connor and people like Priceline, and there was another one I saw the other day. I haven't been able to dig up the link while we've been talking, but another have started to talk about, well, how much value you're getting for the money you're paying your franchisor.
Right.
And the reason that I think this is bad for the chains is not because these folks are right or wrong. It's because the dialogue comes back to, what's this coming back to you in heads and beds? Like the conversation is becoming purely about the transaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to all the other things that chains also do. Whether or not it's a good value is besides the point. It may be a good value for some hotels. It's not a good value for other hotels. But the whole argument is boiling down to, you spent this much, here's how many reservations you got from it. You spent this much, here's how many reservations you got from it.
Mhm.
Which ultimately is always going to benefit the OTA because you only pay for the reservation.
Right.
They're
Right.
narrowing the dialogue down to a reservation only. And I think that's, if you're an asset manager, if you're an owner, if you're somebody like that, it doesn't mean that the OTAs are wrong. It means that if you're looking at a chain and things like that, look at all the other things they bring to the table when you're valuing them to say whether or not it's a good deal or not. And then if it's not, by all means, go independent, because these trust systems exist that can allow you to be successful in it.
Well, I don't think you were on the show when I brought it up, but I think one of the biggest risks to the chains is actually probably the biggest reason to choose a chain over going independent, which is access to financing.
That's right.
Right.
And I think Expedia should just go make a relationship.
As soon as you
Just-
said that, reminded me. You asked me to get those the feedback that I got off of the posting.
Yeah,
'cause
what
it-
was the feedback? Yeah.
Yeah, they were very interested that it was mostly it was positive. It's like, hadn't thought of that before. Interesting twist. That was kind of most of the positive to it. And what it was, just so you all know, is that I sliced up our show and then piece out posts and so forth over it. And that one of the quotes that got pieced out was Ed's comment about, OTA should get smart and finance hotels, since sometimes can only get financed by actually pairing with the brand. And that the OTA should consider going over and offering finance opportunities for these hotels, so they
Because
will
then the
brand.
hotel can piece together the rest of the services they get from the brands,
Right.
and like it kind of gives you more flexibility.
Well, and it definitely does, because the problem, I think it all comes down to attribution. I mean, we were talking about it with the retargeting and that sort of thing. What is the attribution and the true value of that brand to that hotel? And you do have to, translate it down to room nights and bookings and shifting share and all that sort of thing, because you put that sign on the roof versus another sign. But there's a bigger problem where you have the GDSs, and the GDSs, you are only associated for that hotel with one chain code.
Mhm.
So if you're, pick a brand, it doesn't matter. Kimpton, right? If you're that brand, anyone who books through IBM, through American Express Travel, Kimpton gets credit for that, even though it may be in the same building or adjacent to the IBM headquarters, right?
Yep.
Has nothing to do with it. So huge volumes of business. And when you're a Hilton Garden Inn paying, on average, according to HVS, 14.9% of rooms revenue out to Hilton in your fees, that's off of everything, every single room. That's 15% of total room revenue is a freaking big number and when you layer on whatever they pay for booking, let's say it's 12 or something like that on top of that, Visa, fees for settlement, that sort of, you're getting up to 30%. And that is not a sustainable number. and something's going to break at that
Here's
point.
the thing.
Because
In
numbers are huge.
franchise systems, only one entity makes money.
Yeah.
That's the eventuality of a franchise system.
When I worked for,
They don't all
when I
start
worked
that way. But that's the eventual goal, is as much of the profit as possible that will be allowed ends up on the franchise side.
Over a decade ago, when I worked for,
not saying all,
Sendent, no, but when I worked for Sendent as a group, they were churning, and this is well over a decade ago, $2.5 billion a year in free cash flow off of the franchise. That was their model, right? Just franchise the hell out of it, and it's a great business if you can keep scaling it. So
now, I want to be. I'm treading lightly.
Yeah, because you can get in a lot of trouble tonight.
I can get in a lot of trouble. So I just posted 2 links. This is a topic I've talked about a couple of times. Once a year, I write something about this because it just keeps coming up.
Yep.
But Ed, I understand what you're saying, right? I mean, the thing about being a franchisor is, in a gold rush, it's great to be selling picks and shovels, and that's certainly the way they're set up. They are a picks and shovels business. If you run your hotels correctly and work with the system correctly and are a good type of property to work with those systems, right? Mm-hmm. Which not everybody is. Mm-hmm. Hotels can do very, very, very well.
Absolutely.
Obviously,
no question.
So I want to be a little balanced about this. I do think the franchisors are in the most trouble they've been in a long, long time.
And all of the hotel groups are franchisors now. Really, they're all asset light. Oh, yeah. Most of them are management light. So, yeah.
And I think that is a monumental error by at least some of them, if not all of them, frankly. Right. But at least some of them, it's a terrible idea.
I've been saying it all along. They're no longer hoteliers.
Correct. Right. That's right. Well, I'll tell you a true story. I will remain anonymous on this one, but you can probably piece it together.
But he is saying
a long time ago. Well, no. I mean, I'll keep the parties anonymous. I
thought we needed an enhancement where we shaded, we dimmed the light.
Did the voice and everything. The voice.
Yeah.
I'm going
to be. No, we visited a bunch of hotels for a project I worked on. And literally, Hotel A was empty, and was fine. There was nothing wrong with it, etc. Hotel B, from a competitive brand, was undergoing reservations. We couldn't find the front door of the property. And yet when we went in there, the general manager was spectacular. He talked about all the work that they were doing to improve the product. He talked about the fact that he was taking guests to the bar across the street for a welcome reception cocktail each night since their bar was under construction, right? And they were running at about 95% occupancy. And it was the first time really that the penny dropped for me in a big way, because I was like, oh, I get the problem. Property B is in the hospitality industry, and property A is in the franchising industry, right? And one of those actually has value to guests, and one of them doesn't. So,
you've heard me say this before. It's deniable culpability in the corporate world. It's the ability to say it's not my fault, it's something else. And franchise operations allow that.
Well, I want to be clear. No, if I was running a real estate investment trust, and I was buying assets that happened to be assets that contained a business that was a hotel, I would be flying a flag, and it would be run by a top-tier management company.
Yeah.
Because when you're running a real estate investment trust, you're running 75-year, 100-year pro formas where you need consistency in deliverables. So that means on the years you could have made a crap ton more, you'll take the haircut so that on the years you could have lost a ton, you don't.
Well, what you're looking for is cash flow and NOI,
Right. And I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying from an operational perspective, in your example, Tim, is that the first hotel had the mindset, because they weren't into the hospitality industry, but they were into the brand relationship and so forth. Hey, it's brand's responsibility, or it's someone else other than my responsibility as to
but I mean, to be fair, they were both franchised properties.
Right, but how they were being treated.
One was run by a hotelier, and one was run by a franchisee. And to be entirely fair on both sides of this, half the blame goes to the franchisee and half the blame goes to the franchisor, right? And half the credit in the one case goes to the franchisee and half the credit goes to the franchisee.
But my argument is, if you're a really good hotelier with an interesting property, in a good location. So I think those three things, I question the decision on flying a flag.
With one other caveat, Ed, I think you also have to look at chain scale, right?
Yeah.
If you are if you are a select service, if you are an economy property and things along those lines, I think flags make a lot of sense for a long time to come.
Yes. Yep.
And
obviously, so does Blackstone.
Yeah, for sure, right.
They've moved out of the luxury investment space and have really doubled down on the economy.
Right. Now, I'm ex-leading hotels, as you all know. Check your bingo card. And so I'm probably going to show my biases here. But if you're a luxury property, if you're a pure luxury property, I think you should be asking yourself, if you're flying a flag, why? It doesn't mean you shouldn't, but it does mean you should start from the point of view of, explain to me why this is so, right?
Well, or if you're a luxury property, if you're flying that flag, or you're in a soft brand or whatever, or you're going to, I think all the hoteliers everywhere need to do that. And I quite frankly, the owners that I talk to, they don't have a good metric for this. They've got hunches, they have relationships and that sort of thing. They don't, and that's kind of good for the brands. There isn't a firm measurement process at this point to really say, hey, I shifted empirically from A to B and this is what happens. People have a lot of anecdotal, we did this and it worked out, but again, there's so many factors of competition,
there's a lot of variables,
similar properties loading up all the brand. What are they really doing? And again, this whole
market segment,
brands, all that stuff.
Location.
Right. Yeah. All those factors.
If you're a group house, yeah.
To take this down to a very small level, for when I used to do restaurants, and I made the mistake of opening and building restaurants for lawyers and doctors who, because they were good at one thing, thought they were good at everything, including running a restaurant. And I inherited this one restaurant that was absolutely stunning. They had everything right design-wise. The product and everything was great. The great bar selection, everything else, the parking, everything was all big span new, great, and dead empty. And 2 blocks down the road, or maybe a little bit farther than that, a hole in the wall, dirt floor, peanut shells all over the freaking place. You couldn't get close enough to the bar to get a beer. Right. And the guy hires me up. He says, I want to be those guys. I want to be that. And I go in, and the bartender is some guy that's been doing it forever and thinks he knows everything. And the servers all thought they knew everything, and they pretty much were just waiting for people to walk in the door. They weren't doing anything about it. Right. And then I go down to this other bar that's jam-packed, and the beer was slightly warm. The bathrooms were atrocious. The place smelled. It was, the old bar stank kind of smelled to it and all. But you couldn't get into the place, and it was because the people that were at that restaurant, that bar in that restaurant, when you got there, they apologized for being slow, and they were trying to get a beer handed. They're telling the guests, it's like, hand this back to him, and you felt like you wanted to be there. And
the other guy said, now imagine if you put those two things together.
Right. Make it really nice and clean.
Right. And gave people good service.
Right.
There was the strategy of it all. It's like I went over and I started trying to steal the staff with giving them the autonomy. And of course, the people that were in the new shiny place, they thought they already knew everything. And I literally, one of the biggest things I ever did in my life, I brought the whole crew in to a restaurant across the street that I wanted to hire and say, stay here. And then I brought a staff meeting of everybody that was in the new restaurant that I was taking over, and fired everybody. It was the biggest mass firing I've ever done in my life. I had 46 people that stared at me going, you can't be serious. I'm like, yeah, bye. Thank you very much. Your checks are cut off of here. The accountant will hand them over to you as you walk out the door. And then I walked across the street where I had my crew all set and ready. Say, guess what, guys? come on in, because we're going to start a new thing, and brought over fewer people that did more work. And
One of those where Lauren divided the room in half and said, everybody on left half of the room, thanks so much. Oh, by the way, Bob, you're supposed to be on the left.
No. He goes, no, I'm sorry. I mixed that up. I meant mine.
Yeah, exactly. yeah. Fortunately, this was long before social media or online or anything, because I can only imagine the blowback I would have gotten nowadays had I pulled that same stunt.
Well, I know I've told this story before, but I one of my all-time favorites. I was speaking at a conference, and afterwards, a hotelier came up to me, and he said, "You do internet, right?" And I said,
daily.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, sure. And he said, so I keep getting all these negative reviews on TripAdvisor. I need you to make those go away.
Go away. Yeah.
And I said,
good. You're fired.
I said, so have you fixed the things that people complain about? And he said, well, no, I can't do that. Yeah. And I said, so what do you expect I'm going to do? He said, well, you can go, you can do whatever you do on TripAdvisor to make those stop.
Sure, and that'll be $150,000 up front, guaranteed.
No, I was like,
don't call me back, I'll call you.
Right. But it was this crazy thing. He thought I had some like magic internet pixie dust that I could go in and sprinkle on TripAdvisor. And
there are organizations selling that too.
Yes, I know, but those people are idiots. What you need to do. No, I mean, realistically, if you want to get good reviews on TripAdvisor,
it's really easy.
Reviews are an output, not an input.
Do you want to get rid of all the bad reviews you got on TripAdvisor? It takes about a 65% renovation. And then you can apply to have them all removed.
No, it could be.
Well, that's true, but actually, there's easier ways than that. I've told this story. No, I've told this story too. Right, sell it to your wife. Right. But I know I've told this story also. A client I worked with, a client who I've mentioned before early in the day, they got good reviews. They're a good property. They got the occasional poor review because it was a question more of expectations. Right. And what we did was we went through, we looked at all of the things that people commented on that they really, really, really liked. And then what we did was we went ahead and updated a lot of the content and a lot of the photos and things like that on their website to focus on the things that they were outstanding at.
Yeah.
And actually, Stuart, there's a hotel in your neighborhood that owns their problems so well that it blows my mind. They don't really get horrible reviews, except for when they accidentally put someone in a different room category, because they're literally like 9 motels cobbled together as a single hotel. They're city blocks, but they do a good job of marketing the expectation.
Yeah.
And where you stay when you only plan to sleep.
Right. Yeah. And that works out really, really well, right? Yeah. Be good at the thing you're good at. Don't try to be,
and provide value.
If
you provide value,
right? Provide value. Don't. Obviously, if you have things that are genuinely disasters, fix them to make them not disasters. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be not terrible. And
own your limitations as well.
You mentioned the unclean restrooms in the bar. Make the restrooms clean. That seems like a fairly low bar to clear to be. Yeah,
at least put some ice in it. Dirty. That's what they do in Boston. Just put ice in it. It makes it fancy.
We worked with one client that was having a lot of issues. It was a smaller, older property, and they were trying to sell it as a newer, modern property. So the negative reviews they get was the ceilings are low, the rooms are small, stuff like that. We're like, you've got to own this. This is
You're a European boutique hotel in Myrtle Beach.
Exactly. So call the rooms cozy. Use words like that.
Rustic.
Set the expectation. Yeah, rustic, cozy. But you've got to set the expectation, and as soon as they think their negative reviews went away.
And actually, this talks to a good conversation Lauren and I were talking about, where so many hotels market themselves incorrectly.
Right. Yes.
They're marketing to someone who doesn't stay with them.
Right. Yep.
Or
what were we calling it? Aspirational
marketing. Yeah, aspirational marketing. Yeah, no, you had some great examples out of that, of where people, the ownership, it's like we used to talk about pictures. People, the owner always wanted a picture of his porte-cochere or the building on the website. It's like, nobody cares about the Portuguese except for you because you own the damn thing.
Right.
And the conversation actually came out, and it's nice to hear it, Stuart, you talking the same way, is the way that websites have been maturing through the ages is that they've been following generalities. It's like, oh, I like the look of this website. I mean, most web designers, when they first start talking to a new client, they're like, so do you have examples of websites that you envision your website to look like? And it used to be a standard way of approaching the problem. It's now actually one of the worst ways because you're trying to make yourself look like somebody else. What you need to do is define what it is that you need to do well, and that's the starting point that you develop the site for. Because the conversation that Ed's just talking about is, I'm facing that right now with budgeting. I'm knee deep in budget stuff right now, and I'm redesigning stuff. And it's like we're massively changing over the methodology of stuff. It's like, quit trying to be stuff that you're not. Cut all that out of the site. Get rid of all that extra garbage and be excellent at what you need to be. You need to be mobile, speeded, functionality, whatever it is, and get off of this. I want to act like I'm a resort, or I have all these different things, or I want to be a location destination authority. You can't. You lost that battle. You're not the authority. Connect to them, but don't be them, or don't try to compete with them.
I need to add one point to that I do want to caution folks. You know, you can spend a lot of money on a website where you're trying to be all innovative and cool and all this other kind of stuff. If you've noticed, one of the reasons that the websites increasingly look similar is because things are getting standardized. It's a more mature platform.
There is a way to merchandise.
There's a way to merchandise, right? Yes. I would say don't get too crazy. Like, definitely make sure it looks modern, definitely make sure it looks updated, etc. Don't get too crazy from a
background
design
should
perspective.
Be white.
Focus instead, though, on your content and your images doing exactly what you just said, Lauren, of demonstrating what the property is. But, you know, if some design firm comes to you and, you know, Stuart, I don't think ever does this, but if he does, you know, he can kick me later, you know, but comes to you and says, okay, we've got this idea for something that nobody's ever seen before on the web. You should run away. You should run far and you should run fast, you know, because we are starting to really know this is what people expect. And I always use the story of, you know, why the gas pedal's on the right and the brake is on the left in cars? Because if you reversed them, people would die, right?
Actually, the pure fact that auto manufacturers have recently started rebuilding the shifter because it's not mechanically linked to anything anymore. Right. Like, look at how much of a failure that's been.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
People
the guy
know
from
how
Star
this
Trek
stuff works.
Killed himself because the shifter. He couldn't figure out how to put it in park.
But people know how this stuff works, right? And people spend most of their time on websites that aren't yours. So if you're going to make your website look a lot different than all the ones that aren't yours, you may be setting yourself up for trouble.
I mean, I think a smart idea is the whole background color of your website should be the same color blue as Stuart's shirt.
Yes.
And
so spinny little letters and stuff. Yeah. But no, to that point too is that with Google and the standardization that's going on, Google is defining what they are or not willing to accept in functionalities. We know the mobile is the internet now. And, you know, I was going to bring up a quick comment that I'm fighting with right now is the mobile interstitial penalty that came out in January, where overlays and so forth within your mobile are now getting penalized. And at the time, Google didn't admit that it was penalizing. They're saying, hey, this is a preference not to have. But now they're showing up and they're ponying up that says, yeah, we're penalizing the crap out of you. Your mobile site started going down organically because you had all this crap popping up.
Trust me, anything Google says, a suggestion that they don't like something or this works better.
It's affecting you. It's affecting you.
Please pay attention to that.
Yeah, which goes to the point of the desktop when they're like, well, so is desktop being treated the same way? Oh, no, we're just looking at it right now. No. You're getting messed up on that one, too.
Yeah.
But to this end, and Tim, directly to your point, there is standardization because of the maturation of design that functionally do work. Guidelines like 3 clicks to purchase should be kind of a mantra. I mean, there are sometimes you can't make it happen that fast, but most of the time you should be able to allow it to happen that fast. The content and the ways to navigate and so forth should be very particular to your product, and not just because you want to, as Ed was pointing out, have aspirational ideas of what you want to portray. Be realistic in what you have, and you can actually speed up the purchase process rather than people begin to question because the reviews don't match the content, the images don't match the story, whatever it is that creates the confusion. So yeah,
right.
Or if you like the way
your guests should aspire to stay with you. You shouldn't aspire to attract guests who aren't the folks who are staying with you, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's one of the things we like to do because historically people used to say, I think one of you mentioned, what sites do you like as the starting point. But what we like to do is engage your guests. And there's a lot of ways you can do it, especially with social media now, where you can show them designs and see how they respond. See
A or B.
information.
Right.
Yeah.
A/B tested, baby.
And then you can continue to test and optimize. And the reason that we're getting so many sites are homogenized now is so many people are doing similar tests and coming to the same conclusions.
Right.
Psychological things impact conversion in a positive way. So
and my theory is that yes, things are getting standardized, and then at some point people will go, that all looks the same, and there will be some sort of new, and that's
I
fine.
think the most important thing to anyone who asks you what's your favorite website is you should also take them on the way back and show them your favorite website from 4 years ago.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good point.
Oh.
Well,
I agree. I think Flash is about to make a no.
but to that end, I've always
has anybody seen there is still a Flash website for a hotel.
That damn Cold Fusion certification icon.
Hey, I tell you what though. Hey, no. If you have a Cold Fusion, you are a rare unicorn with pixie dust, because the people that still have some sort of Cold Fusion functionality cannot find anybody.
We still have some legacy Cold Fusion sites out there from older clients that don't want to reinvest. So our developers still know a little bit of Cold Fusion. Interesting sidebar. I got my first job. It was with this company out of school. I had a computer science degree and a physics degree, but I haven't really done any practical coding. And I went to an interview, and they're like, Cold Fusion, right? I'm like, sure, it's programming. I learned Cold Fusion on the plane on the way over from England to America is how I got there.
Man, that's some crunch learning.
That's my career as a Cold Fusion developer, yeah.
True story. True story. The first website I ever built was HTML and Perl, and I learned that basically the same way. And then we upgraded everything to Cold Fusion over the course of about a year-long period, except for a couple of black box Perl scripts that we, it was Perl. The old joke about Perl code. This is getting way too geeky, but was that it was write-only software. Like you couldn't read the code. And we documented it so poorly, we couldn't remember what it was doing, so we just left that and then called for Cold Fusion.
That explains half the old website. In the background. Holly asked if anybody's... Now, here we are talking about coding, and we, in our midst, who won't join us visually, is about to dive nose first into 6 months of hardcore coding, hacking, programming, education. Holly is, and she asked, does anyone use Hotjar? Anyone?
I've not used it. It's a visualization. It's a analytics tool, right?
There's heat mapping, a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
It's like I think it's $90 a month. It's under $100 a month or something like that for analytics. Yeah, lots of usage testing sort of thing.
Yeah, I use PT Engine for heat maps. It's easy. Although I'm finding out now was about the homogeneity that's coming out of a website design and so forth. I've made mention before that I always heard when I was in the C-level rooms, there's usually 3 questions that get asked about any product. How much money can we make off of it? Who else is doing it? Okay. And how successful are they at it? So it's one of those, if your measuring stick is always about whether or not you're the first or whether somebody else has already been successful, you're going to get that kind of commonality in product development, because nobody's going to say, hey, I got this really new key thing called a carousel that we should drop in, until somebody did it and was successful, at which point everybody like lemmings will fall over and start doing something.
Although I will say, you also still have the refreshing ones. I recently got to go meet one of the billionaire owners of one of our new clients to present to them this experiment they were doing with Flip2. And I watched him interact with his team. And so his team put this meeting together and basically schooled me on the guy doesn't own a computer, but he understands people, so talk about the people side of it. And I was like, okay, great. I got into it, and he asked a couple questions, and then he started asking, well, wow, if it did that for us, why isn't it doing more? And then finally looked at his team and said, do you like this? And they were like, yeah. And he's like, all right, I like it. You're good. And I was just like, oh my gosh. This is the most amazing decision process I've ever seen, because it's the way it should have worked. The people he hired, who were smart, brought him something that they tested.
Right.
It did well, He said, great. Can it do more? Yes. All right. Do you like it? Yep. Great. Do it. I was just like, oh, I wish everyone was this way.
Yeah. Well, and his team probably didn't bring him a lot of crap that they didn't like,
Right.
and things like that, and have him make the, they had, here's the answer. We would do that. If you didn't have to make the decision, we would do this. This is good. Here's why we need it. And and in that case, the answer should probably be,
Robert, I think you really hit it on the head that they weren't using him for absolution. They were looking for him for decision making, which creates that kind of dynamic that you referred to. It's like, instead of bringing in front of the boss because you two at peer level can't make a resolution decision, so you got to go to dad to get a yes or a no, that kind of crap dilutes real good decision making, because then that's the role he plays. Compared to what you're just giving as an example, it was like, hey, look, we would do this had it, but we need your endorsement for this, and he trusts the people that are bringing it to him.
We need your money because it was unbudgeted.
Hey,
And at scale, it's expensive, but it's not expensive because it drives value.
the number of clients that I work with where we start off on the, let's go back to your business objectives. And what are you trying to accomplish? And then all of a sudden, if they want to do something, it's like, well, does this doesn't tie into your business objectives or the budget? Yeah, it's an extraneous budget item. Why would a CFO sign off on that? You're taking a right-hand turn, and if you can't justify it, if you don't have the metrics, if you don't have the KPI, whatever it may be, you're making it a difficult decision for them to say yes, sort of thing. So, but again, that's how so many decisions kind of get randomly.
Well, this is where I think the insanity is with site conversion tools. I'm sorry, I like how you make the decision to spend more than like very little on site conversion tools blows my mind, because you have to ask the question, should I spend it on the Band-Aid?
Yeah.
Or maybe should I fix my site so it converts?
Oh, I was at a...
Oh my gosh, like, who would have thought?
I was at an HSMAI luncheon yesterday for Dallas chapter, and presentation on SEO and SEM, fine, presentation, everything like that. But what they kind of missed was underlying site architecture. And I know they're trying to keep it high level and everything's good, but it's like, man, guys, if that's wrong, you can put all sorts of lipstick on the pig, but it ain't going to work, right? Yep. You're either going to have a site that's poorly performing because it's just laid out wrong, and the Google bot can't figure out what the hell you're doing, sort of thing, or it has such bad navigation that you can't, a human can't get through it, or who knows what you're doing. Yeah, and all these little tools and tricks, and hey, we're doing this to get listed. Like, no, fix the freaking architecture.
Stop the tricks.
Yeah.
Have a fast site that does what a site should do.
With good quality content that answers the questions that matter to your guests.
Mm-hmm. Right. And have it organized. One of the points I made at the end was, if it's broken out, if you're a wedding site, that's great. Then talk about, or honeymoons or whatever that is, have some areas where it goes off like that. Or if you have different other things, have it broken down so people land on those pages and they can find their way back to the site or book, or everything's super easy and all the related stuff is together. But that's where I see so many hotels. Again, they get a template from God knows where and they just start patching stuff together and throwing stuff up.
And which, by the way, if you are going to go that route of I'm just going to buy something cheap, then don't buy it from someone that's a vendor in this industry. Buy it from at least a different
space.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, that has a bit more scale to it. Like, if you're just going to cheap out because you're literally just checking the box for whatever reason that decision is okay.
No, you're right.
No, there are reasons. Like, you may be about to renovate. You may be about to tear down the building. Who knows?
Right.
But buy it.
Fuel did a great podcast. Did a fantastic podcast about how to market when you have no money at all. Like, you're tiny. You're all the things you said, Ed, or you're a tiny little property, or I once got a call from a guy. Neat guy doing a cool thing. He'd just taken over a 6-room inn in Mexico, right? And has no budget. I mean, the thing doesn't charge much. It's a lifestyle business for the guy.
Right.
Go check out. I'll find the link and I'll post it. Stuart, you probably have it. But
I forget which episode. It was recent. It was
very recent.
How to market on
a half ago or something like that. Yeah. And it was fantastic advice of, get a credible WordPress theme or get
Absolutely.
a Squarespace site, and don't screw with it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
so it's well worth listening to. It's great advice all through.
Yeah, people are still so obsessed with shiny stuff, whether it's plugins, whatever. Right now I'm doing an audit for a potential client, and I'm looking through their entire marketing budget, where it's spent. Firstly, percent of their gross.
Wait, you cut out.
Hang on.
Go backwards.
Do it again.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hello? All right. So I'm doing an audit for this group, and they're focused on the bright and shinies. So first of all, 0.2% of their total gross revenue is allocated to marketing budget. So way underfunding their marketing budget. They don't have a mobile site. They don't have an email platform. They're not even collecting their guest history emails and putting it in their email database. But they are investing in web beacons.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
Lauren's like, so?
No.
dropping the mic.
No.
That's
the end of my story.
And,
They're focused on the bright and shinies. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not focused
well,
on
we say that constantly, and I say it all the time. Like, why are you talking about virtual reality when you suck at email?
Oh, they're doing VR as well. I forgot. They're doing web beacons and VR.
Well, then what's the problem? I don't understand what the problem is. They got those two
Stuart,
down, man.
That's right.
Stuart, I can't wait. Can't wait to see what you do for these people.
Can I want to introduce a term that we've danced around a little bit here today. Nobody's used, but it's something a company I worked at. This was very much our strategy. It's called fast follower. We didn't have, at a company I worked for once upon a time, and some of my clients to this day don't have the budgets that some other folks do. Great. Let them blaze the new path. Let them go ahead and figure out, this is the cool, hippest, newest design and stuff. Because anybody remember Marriott a bunch of years ago? This probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. Marriott launched this big, huge redesign of Marriott.com. And it was radically different than anything anybody was doing, right? And it lasted for about 5 months before they made some pretty radical changes to the pretty radical changes, right? Great. They spent a lot of money on that. It didn't work. So they spent a lot of money fixing it. And that was okay.
Like everyone else's, yeah.
Yeah. They had a lot of money to go test that thing out and find out, yep, that was a bad idea. Great.
Mm-hmm.
If you were the folks who don't have a lot of money, don't be that guy. Wait till Marriott gets it right, or wait till Expedia gets it right, or wait till Booking.com gets it right, or
let's even
gets it right, and then make your thing work like that, for God's sake.
We're focusing on the easiest part, which is how you get started. Let's talk about something. Stuart and I had an interesting conversation 2 days ago, because I called him because I was doing a benchmark on some data, and I noticed that in that data, his clients, he represented both the best and the worst. And I called him because I'm like, what's happening here? And he said, the worst is because of a decision they made. And so then we started talking about, well, have they ever reconsidered that decision now that they know the penalty? And so what it was in this market, he was the fastest loading booking engine and the slowest. And the only difference was a PMS connection. So the question is the PMS connection worth the 17-second difference in load?
Ooh. Can you make it progressive?
Survey says no.
It's the last thing to load, or does the PMS connection really? Is that the booking?
Rates, when the request is rates and it's real time querying the PMS for rates, and actually I told them a story of how we had to wrestle with this at Easy Yield. Where, because we didn't want to end up like Pegasus. Like, what killed Pegasus originally was the brands that convinced them that they had to be real-time rate and inventory. So Pegasus at one point, I forget what it was, but it was something like 10,000 non-revenue generating transactions per revenue generating transaction.
Yeah, that's about right.
Right. Yeah. So then when I looked at it and I looked at that problem, my thought was this: okay, a caching of this much time only costs this much.
Right.
Then, if you need a little bit more real time, it costs you this much. And then if you want real time, here's what real time costs. You decide. And every time I put that in front of a hotel group, no one ever even thought that real time was worth it.
Right.
Mhm.
And the big mistake that Pegasus made was not abiding by the guarantee that they made to their primary investor, Trident Capital, in a meeting that I attended, where Trident Capital insisted before they got their investment that they had to be a business intelligence platform, so they tracked this kind of information and could then do analytics and develop caching and figure out all this stuff. And the guarantee was made by the leadership of Pegasus that they would do that, and they never did. And that is what killed them. That it wasn't an
Well,
unforeseen
that
sort of thing.
deciding to become a CRS and ignore the switch business.
Well, no. Well,
no,
okay.
no,
The problem with the Switch business in 1998, when we were looking at acquiring them, the Switch business only generated about $10 million a year. It was nothing, right? I mean, there was no revenue stream on it. It was ridiculous. And our strategy when I was at Sabre was actually we were going to provide free switching, right? That was, and just kill Pegasus. That was the core strategy. But they were getting 60% of their revenues off of commission clearing.
Mhm.
That was their business model, and it was ugly. Yeah, and so we ran away from it.
So
CRS,
anyways,
and the
so
CRS at a time was not that bad for the
No, it wasn't.
for the time. The CRS was quite
Resview,
good.
Resview one,
ResView NG though was
Well,
not that great.
no,
well, they I mean, we don't need to.
Unires was fantastic.
We don't need to relitigate history. I mean, the reality is, they made a whole bunch of errors all around the same time.
Yeah, that's hard to pull it apart. So, but my point here is why I brought this up and put Stuart out there that he had the fastest and the slowest loading booking engine in a market was because sometimes the decisions you make, you need to go back and look at them and ask yourself, did I make the right decision?
Well, or what I make, we do this all the time with consulting clients, all the time. You may have made the right decision then.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the right decision
today?
now?
Is this the right decision now? Right?
Or do they have the right? Yeah. Or do they have the right metrics to even measure it?
Yeah.
Because in so
Absolutely.
many cases, and I've seen multiple situations where metrics are not put there because they don't want it measured in case it goes badly.
Yeah.
I mean, which is just really horrific.
Yeah, but those are the people you need to take for a little walk outside and then
vendors
to invite them back in when you come back.
Vendors who do that, we're going to do all this stuff for you and go and they don't think of saying, wait a second, this is how we justified our thing. This is our business objective. This is the solution. These are the metrics we're going to look at. We think this is going to work. And then all of a sudden realize, oh, there's no way to measure if it worked or not. Which is,
listen,
you want to beat your head on the floor.
I'll pull a Robert Cole here. I'm past being able to be incriminated for this, but my favorite thing I did to one of my competitors ever was saying no to a core on this god awful thing they wanted. Just I straight up was like, no, sorry guys, and they're like, but you're our choice.
Yeah.
We just need you to do this thing you're saying no to
Right.
for half the price that you're quoting us. And I said, I know the other guy will do it.
Yeah,
So,
go with them. Great
go with
decision for them.
Yep.
Well, I don't want to lose track of Holly's one comment when we were talking about decision makers and how the process gets done. She had an interesting stat she threw up in the chat. 6.8 is the average number of people who are now involved with even the $25,000 decision.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But I want to tell you,
12 different opinions from that 6.8 people.
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Four of
a
them
client-
don't. Yeah, four of them don't want to make the opinion because they don't want to be held responsible in case it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Well, I got to tell you one quick story. I worked with a client not long ago outside the hospitality industry, but just to illustrate the case in point. And sometimes you get into these problems because incentives are misaligned. We were brought in to analyze the marketing activities of a company. It doesn't matter who the company is, and I can't share it anyway. But the situation was the agency for part of their marketing, was doing some things that were really, really terrible.
Mhm.
And, you know, my gut instinct right out of the gate was, well, they need to get rid of this agency. And then what I came to realize as we dug in a little deeper was that the agency was getting direction from somebody within the company based on how that individual was incented. The
Yep.
agency had been providing recommendations for a long time not to do the things that they were doing.
Right.
But
Yep.
it actually helped the person's bonus if they hit certain metrics that were actually bad for the company in other
Oh, yeah.
ways.
Yep.
Yes.
You know, and so ultimately the recommendations we came back with were keep the agency. These guys are good. They're doing a good job. They do a lot of things that are right. Listen to the advice they're giving you,
Mhm.
right? And change the incentives for the person who
Right.
is giving them terrible direction,
Right.
you know, which is ultimately what ended up happening. And that person ended up leaving the company because they were like, well, I liked it better when I made money the other way, which is anher thing entirely. But
Yeah.
no.
Of course you did,
Absolutely.
because all you had to do was game it.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but it was,
Hey.
but it was a situation where, you know, they had misaligned incentives that then led people to make terrible decisions or
Honestly,
give poor
you
recommendations.
can see it in our industry today.
You see it all
Post-day
the time.
surveys.
Mhm.
Post-day surveys are completely done wrong, but they're done wrong because entire leadership groups are bonused on whether they get a 4.5 or a 4.6 on a metric.
Yep.
They have no clue how to move it.
And they don't even understand the impact of asking. I think Ed, you brought it up when you changed how I was doing stuff. Asking somebody to negatively critique the last official communication you have.
Oh,
I mean,
why end on a low note?
Right.
I don't understand that.
It,
Well, that's
it took
why-
my mantra.
That's actually why all the surveys I give my clients after we work together are, how much did you like us? I really like you. I really, really like you. I really, really like you.
Hey, I
I'm
can't believe
naming
you
my
missed this.
firstborn child after you.
I can't believe we missed this out of the list that Robert was so generous in providing for us. That the Hilton Hotel senior executives dismissed Airbnb as a lodging company.
Lodging company.
Says Hilton is more about hospitality. I
Yeah.
mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but shouldn't that kind of be backwards?
Well, no, and it is. Actually, I'm going to post something that's it's actually the transcript. So if people want to read it, they can listen to the Masters of Scale podcast, which is Reid Hoffman, who founded LinkedIn, with Brian Chesky, and yeah. What they did, they start off talking about Y Combinator, because Brian Chesky was not a hotelier. He was a design guy from Rhode Island School of Design, right? This was kind of an accidental thing that they got into, but because of the design background is really figuring out what's the problem, how do you need to fix this. So, he's talking about designing medical devices and things like that. And that's what they started looking at, going, here are the problems. The Y Combinator guy said, what about they're like, well, gee, we don't think this will scale because the customers and everything so different. They go, you don't know your customers. And they go, well, they're in New York and they're kind of using this a little bit. They're like, why are you in Silicon Valley? So these guys would fly back and forth like every week to go talk to what's going on with the hosts and the guests. How do you keep it? And they've kept that environment going, right? It's totally customer, based, and they have two customers, right? It's the guest and the host, and how do you make this thing work?
I just posted a link to a blog post that I wrote last year. About a year ago, where Joe Gebbia was talking to Skift. And he said, we didn't come up with anything new. Hospitality has been around forever, and there are many websites like ours. Why did ours eventually take off? Luck and timing aside, what I've learned is we can understand the components of trust and design for that.
Right. Yep. And that is the essence of what they do. Airbnb is hospitality. And even though it's not most of their business, right? It's a shrinking portion, but they are trying to match originally the right host to the right guest, which is a lot harder than matching the right guest to the right room, sort of thing.
Guys,
so,
by the way, timing wise, I do have to drop. I'm going to say one quick thought, and I'm actually just going to read the last line of my blog post because I really liked this one.
If I do say so myself.
I thought I was brilliant in this statement.
Don't pull a muscle
This is going to start. This is going to start a precedent where he just reads the blog post.
No.
But if I want to quote one of my more famous quotes,
I just like this one. This was, if I do say so, this one was okay.
Avid.
It's avid.
Avid.
I wouldn't have eat.
Like I'm an avid listener
Like I'm an avid listener to
Fuel's podcast.
To Fuel's podcast, exactly. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. I thought it had been some. Okay.
Do you think it was like Avid?
I thought it was like
Like
Aquavit.
David without a D?
Avid, yes.
No.
David.
David?
Well, it can't be Avid because then they'd have to try harder.
Cute. Mr. Tim, since you are departing with us, this is that magic time where if people want to discover more about all these fascinating, well-quoted podcasts and blogs that you have, where should they find all of these things?
Flip2.com timpeter.com is the space for everything, or I'm at TCPeter on Twitter.
Excellent. Thank you so very much for taking. We still have a bunch of other topics that we never really hit.
I'd love to hang. Unfortunately, I got to make a call, and I'm back to back.
It's as if any of us are surprised. It's 1:00.
It's 1:00. It's tip time.
And actually, somewhere in here, I got to find a way to eat food. That's going to be special for whoever's on my 2:00 call.
Yeah,
Hey, we have a 2:30, right, or something. You can do it.
Yeah, you can snarf something up,
guys. I'll see y'all later.
Thanks, Tim.
Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you, Robert. You're the one that was generous with all these topics. Was there one that you was just one that you want to make sure we didn't miss out of all the ones you'd given us?
I thought it was
picking
interesting.
on Hilton yet, Robert?
Oh no, we really didn't. We didn't really,
What, picking on?
Well, I
Picking-
mean, you really sounded like you were gonna like slam them.
Oh, which for the Amazon thing?
No,
Or for-
no, for the Airbnb.
Oh,
for
for the
hospitality
Airbnb.
and Airbnb.
Yeah, I mean,
launching.
Hilton runs these hotels, right? The airport Hilton at the north end of God knows whether, such and such airport North Hilton, is just a lodging shelter business in most cases, right? There's nothing specific. People staying there can't tell the difference between one or the other. It's a one-night stay. It's transactional. There's no emotional connection at all. For, I would guess, 85-90% of their guests. Right.
So you're saying they're more like self-storage than
right. Yeah.
hospitality.
Yeah. Well,
I was going to go more
my theory-
metaphorically. I was going to go on the more metaphorical side, but I'm glad you went self.
No, all these hoteliers who are looking at how do you do this? How do you get better ADRs? How do you get better reviews? It's all on the service, right? I mean, you can provide just a slab with maybe some carpeting and a bed, and and rent it out and never maintain it, and you will get a certain ADR based on your location, right?
Yep.
I mean, you will get probably your fair share of the market or whatever that is. Yeah, that's your kind of equilibrium. And what do you do to raise that? You've got to improve mostly, I would argue, the service in many cases. You've got to eliminate the dissatisfiers and then really add satisfiers, and yes, that will generate reviews, that will increase your ADR and all this. And the things that crack me up are all the kind of punditry that's like, oh yes, these good reviews, here's how you do it, and this drives better ADR. It's like, no, having better hotels drives ADR, and it results in better reviews. That's the thing. Now, yes, and if you have those better reviews, you will go, and then it will be a nice virtuous cycle.
Yeah, but here's the thing:
for you.
they can't give that answer because they have hotel owners that don't want to build a better hotel.
Absolutely.
But want to be told that they can get a higher ADR.
I know a GM for a major destination resort. People would kill to be that GM. He finally resigned because the owners would not upgrade the Wi-Fi at all. It was the number one complaint. He's like, I can't work. You guys are freak. And they're like, well, how many additional room nights do we get? And things like that. It's like, it's satisfaction. People complain all the time. They can't get Wi-Fi on the golf course. We've got crappy salaries. Well, they're off on vacation and getting away, and it's like, listen to the freaking guests. If you aren't going to do it, find somebody else to go. Just store people in here and open the cash. Their big activity is opening and shutting the cash drawer. That's what that was their core competency, right? And then getting pissed off when there was less cash in there.
I have a question. I'm trying to figure this out. Is Hilton completely misguided on what Airbnb is? Are they being dishonest to themselves and their stakeholders, or are we just wrong? It's one of those three scenarios. For them to say they're in hospitality,
I'm sorry, the third one I don't.
Third one, yeah, the third one's really not in
the third one.
It can't be that we're wrong, right? Because Ed's right.
Right. I mean, I'm in agreement with you. So how is the third one an option?
That's not even an option. Toss that one off the board. If it was House Hunters, it goes.
So we spent 30 minutes talking about how Hilton and these franchisors really aren't in the hospitality business anymore because they're worried about the numbers of their franchisees. They don't really care about the guest experience. So
I want to be
come
clear.
out and say that
they still care about the guest experience, but it's a different.
It's a means to an end, though.
It's a different level of care. They care about the guest experience to the level that they need to care about it to be able to sell more franchises.
Correct. Yeah. And when you look at what they're doing too, by rolling out like Avids and these other franchises, they're not really doing that because there's a gap in the market for mid-scale hotels in every city. They're doing it so now they can open another franchisee in every market.
And layering over the other ones,
Absolutely.
yes.
Right,
yes.
and not compete. So,
well, again, to your example that you made, Robert, there's a mind-numbing depression that goes on to those types of hotels in the staff world. Because there is no instigation of creativity. It's hard to cultivate that spirit of hospitality when it is mind-numbingly clean. We've got to go make the donuts. The rooms are the same. The context is the same. You get some chef in there that has this creative spirit, like, I want to change the menu. And eventually their spirit gets crushed because there is nobody there that appreciates the effort. There's no change in the direction of the restaurant. It just needs to make sure the breakfast is hot, the buffet's on time, and that there's some sort of lunch options and that the catering gets handled.
You will be assimilated.
Yes, you are being assimilated. You are, resistance is futile. And so we had to get that in there, didn't we? So the idea of it is you need somebody to stir it up. I took over a hotel that was right next to 3 other hotels. And this is back when it was a Holiday Inn Select. And tell me how hard that was, because what the hell was a Select anyway? But there was 3 other hotels immediately around. Our 4th one was being built right behind it. And they all offered the same crap. Just different brand flavors, but they were the same stuff. And if you went from one hotel to the other than the color scheme, the rooms weren't really that different. And you really just need to shake the whole thing upside down and say, we're not going to be this homogenous thing. We're not going to identify our brand representation. We're going to identify where we are and by location. But it takes that kind of kick. And unfortunately, a lot of the ownerships of those hotels just hire at the least common denominator. Somebody that babysits the property rather than is that creative hospitality person that they can get a low salary kind of thing. So it kind of feeds its system process. And unfortunately, Hilton, it's in a lot of positions where their hotels are big boxed enough that they have to maintain the volume of traffic rather than the quality of traffic.
Right. Well, and her big point was basically 2 things. We offer consistency in brand. We offer security, and you kind of go, really, and it completely ignores the trust factor on the security, which is a huge miss. But I think they're intentionally. They have their blinders on, right? Because they're just saying, here's what we do. We've got to keep doing what we do. And, when you start looking at some of the comments that were made.
Well, and also to be fair,
you look at
they have some of the most brilliant people in this industry working there, but they are constrained like crazy from talking to the outside world.
Right. Absolutely. And what they're doing with something like Curio, which is working quite well for them to get more properties and to make more money. Those are unique and individual.
Curio are the best properties in the Hilton collection.
Right. But again, when she says, when you're going to stay, I'll just quote her here, you're going to stay in a Hampton by Hilton or a Hilton, you know what you're going to get. Right. We consistently ensure that we deliver the business people are serving. The beautiful smile that you get from team members when you walk into one of our hotels is, I believe, different than some of the other lodging companies. She is full of shit. I'm sorry, Geraldine, but that your PR people should not have let you say that.
Holy crap.
I don't know, man. I think
Robert, people listen to this show, dude. Wow.
See, I'm not the only one that goes on the razor's edge sometime. I'm not the only one. Thank you, Robert.
How Does
How?
something like
I'll tell
that
you
come
how.
out?
Because
That's
first of
so
all-
completely
first of all,
wrong. I
now
can
I'm gonna
march
flip
into
sides
5
here.
of them and not see that smile.
But here's
Okay?
the thing.
Pandering
I
to
actually
public
think,
opinion.
though, their best product is not the product you probably picture when you hear Hilton. Their best product is their largest product, which is Hampton Inn.
Right.
I think Hampton Inn's the best brand
they're
they
great.
have.
Right.
And actually, I think of all their brands, I think Hampton Inn epitomizes hospitality
Mhm.
better
Oh, yes.
than some of the other brands inside of it. Now,
Yes, I
interestingly,
would agree.
Hampton Inn is also the largest hotel count that they
Right.
have.
Yes.
So, and I think part of the problem, maybe when we're listening to Hilton talk about something, is we picture Waldorf or Hilton,
Mhm.
but you have to remember, in reality, they're Hampton Inn,
Hampton Inns, Garden Inns, right? All
right?
those.
Like they're
Yeah.
Homewood Suites, like
Right.
that
Homewood
product.
suites are great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Embassy suites are great. All those are good products. The service delivery, though, because Hilton does not employ those employees, right?
Right.
They don't necessarily train them. The consistency of the Hampton Inn thing, and trust me, I've run marketing for a chain directly competitive with Hampton Inns. There are 3 great types of general managers for those properties. One is kind of the young college student who wants to make away with the company, learn in the industry, and they take ownership over that. It's the old, they are an innkeeper, right? That
Yep.
is their product, and they are wholly invested in it. The second one, it's a spouse sort of thing, right? They know, and again, they're wholly invested in making this go. And the third one is maybe a retired or older person who's, those guys are fantastic because they take whole ownership, and they do. Somebody walks in, they smile at them, they're there behind the desk. But let me tell you, most of these that are owned by big tranches of, REITs, they've got management companies behind them. That's not the GM behind the desk. It's just somebody who's getting paid minimum wage. They're busy. They aren't smiling. They aren't welcoming. They're just processing people. And that is not the consistent. The reason I said it was bullshit is it is. And second is
But it
they
doesn't
really need to go and measure that. How many people
Yeah.
are really performing that? And I'm sorry, Geraldine, you're going to be sadly disappointed, and do not start setting expectations that you can't deliver, because people will be disappointed and you'll get bad reviews by saying, hey, they didn't smile when I checked in.
Anybody can
But
write
I-
marketing copy. I mean,
Right.
You can
And
write whatever
that's-
you want.
When I was reading this, I paused it a different way than you, because I'm sitting there thinking, at some point they had a big powwow with the upper echelon of PR, and they said, okay, how do we combat this problem with Airbnb? And they said, okay, what are the biggest challenges? One of them is the fear of
Right.
who are you staying with and all that.
Yep.
If you look at
Security,
her verbiage, words like security, words like inconsistent,
Right.
she's really picking at what people criticize Airbnb for.
Right.
I don't think that was a mistake on her part. I think that was
No, not that
calculated.
part.
I think
Not
you're going
that
to
part.
start to see that from everyone within the Hilton organization going after that angle.
Yeah, but the angle where they start saying the beautiful smile you get from team members when you walk into one of our hotels,
Yeah,
that ain't happening.
they don't deliver. Yeah,
No.
I agree.
No.
But they're not worried. I think they're less concerned about what they're
They're not
delivering,
talking
and
to the consumer.
more about
in that
fanning
press
the
release.
flame.
They're
of concern
talking to
about
the
Airbnb.
hotel owners in that press release, though.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same
Well,
thing.
it was on CNBC, right? So
Yeah.
But just even to your point, Stuart, the fact that you can dissect the methodology of what was put into that terminology automatically means that it wasn't a genuine statement; it was a directed statement.
For sure.
Right.
Nothing that comes from corporations as a
Right.
PR piece is genuine, ever.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just like writing and saying, "Hey,
calculated.
from the moment of the fresh, fragrant flowers presented each day in the lobby to the ultra clean desktops." It's like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know what? That's just rhetoric bullshit, because no way does every hotel look and smell that way when you walk in the door.
Right.
But they want you to think that that's the opportunity you're going to get into.
Yeah. Holly
Yeah.
made the point. Hilton has some pretty stringent service delivery requirements, service scores. Yeah, but let's look at how those are really getting measured. And are they getting measured? Are they
And
asking, did
and the
somebody
tolerance lines
smile?
too.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's amazing what they put up with when there's a hotel in the location that they need to maintain presence in.
Right.
They'll put up with a lot of brand variations, and there's so many ways to get around brand upgrading from an ownership perspective. You know, for your cyclic FF&E builds and so forth, that you can grandfather in crap, because gosh knows how many hotel brands we've gone into, and it's a Hilton or it's a Marriott, and you're like, you can tell what generation of refurb they're in just by the fixtures that are still in the room. Yeah.
I like the new Hampton Inn remodels. I like the flooring they're using.
Yeah,
I haven't seen them yet. I don't think.
It's like a vinyl faux wood flooring.
hardwood. Yeah, kind of a faux hardwood, and a lot of hotels are.
It'll
are
wear
doing it.
really well too. Like those will
Yeah.
age.
Yeah, where's
Those were-
well.
those were
Much easier to
Low
clean
maintenance.
versus
Yeah.
vacuuming. You don't
Oh,
have
yeah.
the noise of
Yeah, you can
vacuuming,
Swiffer.
all that sort. Yeah, you don't have to have the big machine. It doesn't have to be plugged in. Uses less electricity. Very smart stuff. Yeah,
Yep.
but again, not as kind of cozy, fuzzy, warm type thing. Maybe.
Oh, now.
Uh-oh.
Holly has
Uh-oh.
joined
Now you're
the room.
Oh,
She's
you're
got
in for
something
it
to
now.
say.
Holly's coming in to get this stuff
Gonna
straight.
tell us
She's
all
coming to
all
talk
wrong.
about the inaccuracies in all of your statements there, Robert.
I totally am. I could not type fast enough.
Hi,
So,
Holly.
hi, everybody. I actually tried to get in earlier, but when...
I clicked yes, and someone told me you said you were just playing around.
Oh, no, that was a different time. But I tried to log on at the beginning, but when there's 5 of us, I think that's it. When Tim was still
be
here, I
6.
couldn't get in.
You
I
can
thought
do
so,
6.
too.
Yeah, there should be 6. I'll check. But yeah, there should be 6.
So this is all I have to say about Hilton. So Signature gets calls from hotels when they're in trouble with their brand because their service scores have dipped below a certain point.
Right.
So all brands end up calling Signature for service training help when they get to that point. I can tell you, when Hilton hotels call us because their hotels have reached that point, they're pretty good. When any other brand calls us, they are awful. I mean, so that's how I say I think Hilton has much more stringent enforcement, I guess, of their
Right.
customer service. And so I can sort of see why she would say that. I really do think it's a huge focus. We work with them all the time in a bunch of different areas, and I feel like of all the brands, they are the most committed to the customer. So I really did have to speak up in their defense. Sorry.
See, and I actually find that interesting because I think I've always thought that the only brand that I thought through history has done a good job of holding brand standard is Marriott. Like from a consumer standpoint,
Right.
like from a traveler, I've always had a much more consistent experience at Marriott than any other brand.
I would tend that to say what particular brand within the Marriott scheme, because full flag Marriotts,
Courtyards and Fairfields.
Courtyards too.
Yeah. Courtyards
Fairfields,
too. Fairfields,
strong.
Residence Inns. Those ones I think are holding brand standards quicker and faster. But full flag Marriotts, they get a lot of grandfathered because of the size of the ship of that they are, that they get by with some stuff.
Yeah.
The smaller
And
ones.
now I say that, but at the same time, I've had the most inconsistent Ritz-Carlton experiences that you can imagine.
Yep.
So, not Ritz.
And that's bad. Those are
the
huge
unforgiving
problems.
Yeah.
Those
guess-
are huge.
Hey, Holly,
problems.
one of the reasons why I joined Robert in some of the course on this for Hilton is I used to bleed blue when I was a GM for Hilton, man. I believed in it. And it was a lot like when I was with IHG, and I thought Crowne Plaza was this pinnacle of hotel quality until I actually ran one and realized how far down the scale had slid by the time that I got into the Crowne Plaza world. Hilton was like that too. I ran a Hilton, and I was proud of it, and I thought it was great until I ran another Hilton, and the ownership wasn't in the same mindset, and they got away with so much junk that the place was a dive in comparison.
Now, were these both Hiltons?
Both were full flag Hiltons.
Yeah.
And it was ownership that had the ability to affect what was done to those properties, getting around stuff, grandfathering in, delaying things, and so forth, and the culture that each of them, having to rebuild both cultures. But the product itself was maintained differently, and Hilton allowed that. And it disillusioned me as to the Hilton brand value. Internationally, totally different story. Internationally, Hilton rocks. Just domestically is where I had the most issues.
Well,
with
but
it.
again, I think if you picture what Hilton really is, which is Hampton Inn, like I think they're very consistent on Hampton Inn. I have not personally been to a Hampton Inn where I didn't have the same exact experience.
Right.
The person at the front desk was chatty because I was waiting for someone. It's like that's kind of the MO of Hampton Inn. If you linger a little bit in that front desk area, you're going to get chatted up.
Right.
Like,
But
and
the
then
people, but the
breakfast.
people stay. Do guests stay at Hampton Inns because of the service quality over a Fairfield? Just look at their competitive set and the competitive brand.
No.
Is that a?
That's all real estate. It's all location.
Right, and that's why my point was on the bullshit. Because she's framing it as a differentiator, and I'm like, I know that's a goal. I know you need to work on it, and God love them, they're trying to do that and really make it go. But I don't see it as a clear differentiator for them because I've had too many meh experience, or I shouldn't say meh experience. They were fine. So, were you greeted pleasantly? Yeah, but their smile wasn't any more warm, or they didn't make me feel any more welcome than
So you're mad
somebody
at
down
the
at the
PR
super.
spin, is what you're mad at.
Well, yeah, I mean, because you're basically and what they're saying is,
I think you may have a little bit too much of your Four Seasons hat on right now.
no, I got my Journey's End hat on, sort of thing. and with that, you go, you know what? I don't see that. I know they need to do that, and that is a potential differentiator, but I don't see it as driving guest preference. I don't see it as driving necessarily in Hampton's case superior ADR and all that sort of thing, just because it's a good thing to have,
So,
and they need to.
So you're saying that guest service is not a differentiator?
Oh, no, it is. But I'm saying in terms of Hampton Inn as a brand versus what Airbnb is doing, right? Airbnb is trying to really look at that host guest relationship. How do you make that really good and fit that correctly, right? Now, in many cases, yes, you might not physically meet the host or something like that, but there's normally a key trade-off. When I stayed at Airbnbs, those guys are doing everything possible to get a positive review, because that positive review directly reflects in their ADR. I mean, straight out, if you've got 5 stars with 40 reviews, you can command a significant price differential on an Airbnb. Not like that at Hampton Inn at all, right? So again, we're talking about rewards and incentives. The guys at Airbnb are aggressively incented by the customer to get those rewards. It's not like that the front end, and I don't know. I have had better interaction with Airbnb hosts than with Hampton Inn.
Well, I mean, that's because
people.
in so many cases you're dealing directly with the owner, so there's no middleman.
That's
In a
Airbnb.
hotel, you have the front, right?
No,
In the
we aren't
hotel-
making excuses. Geraldine's is saying
Right.
Hilton is in hospitality, Airbnb is in lodging, and I call bullshit. I do. She's wrong. Sorry.
I don't think we're really clear on Robert's position on this.
Yeah,
I hope. Well, no, I won't be interviewing her on center stage at Focusrite, but I did. Chris Silcock, I talked about, and Chris wasn't, and he's chief operating officer. Chief operating officer? Yeah, I think so. I think he's COO, but he didn't go there, sort of thing, because that's not. He talked about the problems and what they're working on, that sort of thing, but not that Airbnb is nothing and we're doing this and they're just really bad. Airbnb being bad at hospitality is not a good thing to send as a message to the Hilton owner. It's like, guys, we need to look at them and learn from them and how we make this stuff better and more personalized, and start treating them, treating the guests like, yes, if they don't give us the absolute best, we make, less money. That's my 2 cents. You can disagree with me, but you're wrong.
And I think you can probably tell by the 4 of us pausing.
There's aspects I do agree with in the statement of it. I don't.
I don't.
We're all kind of leaning on the part of the screen that's further away from me.
Because you don't want to call out Hilton.
No, listen, I will call out. I will call out.
Ed?
Listen, I call out people all the time. No, I think what my problem here is, and I think we need to talk about, because sometimes you guys have to do this for me. Your problems with the PR spin and the incorrect message in the PR spin. Not that Hilton doesn't deliver a quality experience.
Oh no, Hampton Inns are fine. I mean, they do a very good job. One of the preferred economy.
I think where you initially caught it all was
service
it kind of sounded like you were like, they suck, and it's like
no. But the saying that Hampton Inns and calling that out as being superior from a hospitality experience to an Airbnb.
Yeah, see that I don't agree with.
I just say no, you can't go there. That's just not. Yeah, that's a disservice to. No, it's not. Yeah. It's not why Hampton Inn is a consistent service delivery of it's the McDonald's
it's the McDonald's versus like the Ruth's Chris. maybe.
I wouldn't go. No, I wouldn't call Airbnb a Ruth's Chris. I
would.
say,
Like most of the Airbnbs I've stayed at.
Ed,
Really
it's
nice.
it's exactly what you
For
said.
the price point.
No, Ed, you made the point earlier. You
Oh, it's the mom
avoided
and pop.
growing up. It's the mom and pop. You
Yeah.
avoided the chains in favor
I
of
gotta
the
go.
mom and pop.
Uh,
All right.
Holly, thank
Sorry.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Holly.
you for adding some strategy, Holly.
Sorry.
Yeah, Airbnb is the mom and pop. And there are bad Airbnbs. I mean, I stayed in a pretty
There were bad
nasty
mom
one.
and pop restaurants too.
There absolutely are. But Airbnb is also structured with the reviews and all, and the whole trust system to make it go.
So how long ago did
You know?
Airbnb hire you, Robert?
I've never worked. Airbnb is not a client.
So Robert, if
And
Airbnb wants to reach you, where can they find you?
No. Hey, I have said from the beginning, from day one when Airbnb started, the hotel industry has to pay attention to them. Same generator hostels. It's like, watch out, folks. You know, these are new models.
But here's the thing where Airbnb is slaughtering the brands is they have hospitality in their digital experience.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
And the brands don't.
Right.
Yes. And they act like a hospitality industry because as soon as any tragedies happen, anything like the Irmas and all these things are happening, who makes headlines first and foremost? Airbnb zeroes out their inventory and market for those who are needing places to go.
Absolutely.
And it's not that the hotels
Zero
don't.
out their fees.
It's just they can't represent themselves as an entity well enough and worthy enough to get that attention.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Very true.
While Marriott is turning people away from cruise ships, you know.
Yeah, that went well, didn't it? Yeah, we didn't even hit that one too hard.
Oh, you didn't hit that one last week? Oh,
We
yeah.
talked about
We did. No, we did. We
Oh,
did.
we hit it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess you guys didn't get sent the article that actually explains what happened. And Marriott tried to take those passengers, but the government entities wouldn't allow them to.
Yeah, and here's the other part to it too. I actually, and I mentioned this to Holly, who kind of get like, hey, wait till we mention this. That Sean Paley, who's a good friend of all of ours, had used Johnny Jet as a reference point that he shared on social, and I thought it just very odd. I shared it over to Holly, saying that just seems like for Sean, that seems like an odd place to create as a source quote. Johnny Jet, Mr. Pay for blogger. If you're going to talk about something that's so near and dear to your livelihood as a Marriott person high in the food chain, I would think that there'd be other sources of content that could be a little bit more validating than a pay for blogger. It just seems a little odd.
Johnny, but Johnny's not really a paid for. He was like one of the very early.
He got lucky when he was on the plane that brought the soldiers over. That's got his fire. That got him buzzed up. Where that got his audience.
Yeah, but he's been doing that long. He's one of the really early. He's been doing it 15 some years.
Yeah,
so I think he's got a good reputation, and I don't see a negative. Yeah.
But it was an interesting discussion as to why. Yes, that was a limitation. That wasn't because somebody was such an ass. It was because they were being limited as what they could do. Well,
and having lived and having gone through Hurricane Wilma in Cancun, on that, yes, the U.S. government came in and sent. With Mark Travel, we had 3,500 people in market. All the U.S. citizens they wanted us to send to the Cancun Convention Center, which had no water, no electricity, and was damaged because that was a collection point. And they had no clue of what to do. They didn't know where anybody was, or just like send them all here. We had manifests. We knew exactly what hotels they were at. And we got our destination management company, who was fantastic, to go, and I mean, these people leaving their families who, their houses have been damaged, to get them on buses and to drive them 15 hours to Merida, which is normally not a 15-hour. They were clearing roads of trees and things like that to get them out to safety. And the only way we were able to do that was we had contacts with the governor of Quintana Roo. And a guy who worked for me called him on his cell phone, and we got the U.S. consulate to stand down, saying, we are taking them. We're flying in planes. It's on our nickel. If you want to deal with them, that's fine. They're going to be here for a week, or we get them out tomorrow. But again, you have to have a very competent service delivery system and operation to make sure that stuff happens.
Speaking of which, it would be remiss of us, given the impact of all these things, first off, for the heartfelt concern for those who are in Mexico City for what they're going through. and also for the tragedies, the repeated tragedy of what's happened to not all of the Caribbean, but some of the Caribbean. People have to be mindful of the fact that the Caribbean isn't a single entity, that because of the tragedies that happened in Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and Turks and Caicos and so forth, that it represents all of the Caribbean community. But it is it's completely tragic what's happened to the islands that have been hit, not just once, but twice, to the level of devastation they have, because I'm sure it'll be coming up in future shows for us. That impacts more than just the tourism quality, which is their livelihood. It impacts the very ability to live in those areas. So,
well, and actually, I had a pretty lively discussion about this in my book club. No shock.
I don't know whether we get more excited about the fact that you have a book club.
I had no idea. I had no idea.
Wow, and a book club.
I mean, I paused. I actually think that this is a strange time for any of those island nations that don't have a big brother government behind them. Like, it's one thing, you're U.S. Virgin Islands, you're Puerto Rico, U.S. comes swooping in, you've got the full aid of a large population behind you. Any of the other islands that have parent countries in Europe and things like that, like they have aid, but then you have these little islands that are
got their independence.
Yeah, but what's that getting you now? Like, I mean, that's the challenge, because how do you go to the UN? Does the UN even see you? Like,
actually, the head of Antigua and Barbuda spoke yesterday, and actually, you guys should listen to what he's. Barbuda has significant problems. I mean, nobody is living on. It's an uninhabitable island. And the biggest problem is not just these hurricanes can come in and hit them and wipe them out, but sea level rise is going to jeopardize. Huge problem for the whole Caribbean, and the Maldives and Seychelles and all these other great places. I mean, none of this stuff is going to get better. It's
right. So do you, as a Barbuda, go look for a merger, perhaps? I mean, what do you do when your island is evacuated? Do you go back?
You just leave. You just condemn it and leave it until somebody wants to rebuild it. Yeah, I know. No, it's a huge problem. I think
can't even imagine that reality, being faced with that reality that your government actually should be asking the question of should they maintain their independence, because they should be asking that question right now.
Yeah.
Because what are you going to do?
It's hard when you say, "Hey guys, come."
When
we want to become
1,500 of you producing the tax revenue for the government. Isn't that? It's 1,500 residents in Barbuda. It's pretty low.
It was pretty low. Yeah, it's pretty low.
I thought
the cruise numbers were in the tens of thousands of people that came through over the course of the year. But that industry's gone. Their ecosystem is gone too. All vegetation, everything else is wiped out.
So what do you do?
The water wells and everything else. Yeah.
I don't have the answer, actually. This is why.
No.
And attracting a country, especially when there's such nationalist sort of driven fervor, is like, oh, are we going to go help and acquire this to go build it back up? I mean, what's the return on investment? Nah.
Right. So what do you do? Like, I can't even imagine being faced with that.
Yeah. It may be. I don't know. My theory is you're going to wind up with some opportunistic, venture capital folks or some individual billionaires who come in and swoop down and
North Korea.
We'll start rebuilding this thing and then they own the island and the island's practically privatized.
Right. People are going to ride the wave of public sentiment, positivity, and
Jurassic Park.
Opportunistic people.
Yeah.
Hello, Jurassic Park. Yeah. I mean, it's going to another cruise ship destination, burrow out against the ecosystem. Who cares? Because they're just going to dredge out what they want anyway. Make it a private island that they don't have
a GoFundMe. They could do a GoFundMe, free trip 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I think they should all move to Nambia, and they'll be fine. No.
Actually, you could just reply to the Nigerian prince who's been.
Wait.
Yes.
Barbuda may have Kofefe. I think that they may have that resource. Yeah, they can probably get the Kofefe if they can break into the Kofefe industry. Then I think.
We've digressed.
Nambia has it locked down. They have.
Well, I know, but that's in Africa. You need a Western hemisphere, sort of thing out here where another Kofefe source. A hyperloop tunnel between Nambia There you go. To
Okay, we're
transfer.
gonna have to shut him off.
Elon
It's
Musk.
getting bad. All right, Mr. Robert. If people want to find out more about your wonderful theory on hyperloops between Nambia and Barbudo, where can they find such
Barbudo.
information?
Oh, no, yeah.
Barbudo.
Yeah, you're gonna get it between Nambia and Barbudo.
Barbudo. Where can they find you?
Rock Cheetah or Robert K. Cole on social media.
Excellent. And Mr. Stewart, where can people find all and your wonderful podcast as well? Where can they find all that information?
Yeah, the podcast you can get at fueltravel.com/podcast and subscribe there. You can hit us up on Twitter at fueltravel as well. Or if you want to hit me up personally with some Star Wars jokes, then it's at Stuart Butler.
Excellent. And Mr. Ed, where can they find you about you and Flip2?
Oh, on social, you can find me, Edward StOnge. And then Flip2 is flip.to.
Outstanding. With that, we were...
Warren, where can they find you?
Well, in my wonderfully progressive painter's house yet to be finished, hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. But to be more specific about the live show, hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. And if you'd like to give any topic suggestions or join us, you can email us at live@hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com.
By the way, I am going to mention now that we're done talking about important hospitality stuff. Do I need to buy you guys pictures to put up in your offices? You have the most boring offices.
This is in process. This is. I've still got boxes around me. This will get. Robert does the generic background.
Mine's a green screen. What are you talking about? This is what I project.
I don't have pictures, but I have Star Wars Lego instead.
The Star Wars.
I know your office looks like a college dorm room.
I used to put stuff up in my office, and then I'd end up moving office. I've moved like 12 different offices, and
just saying, guys. Like,
I know. Well, I'll improve my background as time goes on.
I like how you say mine looks like a college dorm room when you have Avengers pictures in the background.
Yeah, but I have like all the adult stuff over here.
You have adult pictures on the other side of
Yeah, adult pictures.
Whoa!
All right,
I got them all on Rock
Cheetah.
That's right. That's Rock Cheetah. Yeah, after he lost the domain name.
No, don't show the pictures of the adult pictures.
That's awesome. All right,
I save all the good stuff for the stuff I look at.
That's right.
The stuff behind me is just for you guys.
That's just for us. So that concludes our show number 111. I think we were supposed to have a guest host this week that unfortunately I can coordinate the time schedule on. So
was it someone from Hilton? Is that why Robert was so angry at them?
Yes, this was. This was from Hilton. Yeah, no, it wasn't from Hilton.
I call him as I see him.
Yeah.
That pitch was high and outside.
Oh well. With that, gentlemen, thank you very much again for the time. We were well excess of 2 hours today, which just goes to show you the tangents that we chase and the rabbit holes that we follow. But thank you again for all the time that everyone gets to spend, and we will see everyone next Friday, 11:30 Eastern, for show number 112. Till then, thank you all.
And I really love you, Hilton.